Yo, what's going on YouTube and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and guys, we're staying in the Keystone State today as we continue our lineup prediction series. Today we're taking a look at the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now the Pittsburgh Penguins, there is a lot of uncertainty with the Penguins going into this season. The goaltending situation, it seems like Brian Burke is quite comfortable with keeping Tristan Jarry as the starter. Some fans and others would say otherwise. And they're going to start the season without their captain, Sidney Crosby. He's out with an injury. So how will that affect the Penguins lineup? So we'll be looking at that right now. So starting with the whole Sidney Crosby situation, looking at their forward group, the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be. This is a big loss for the Penguins because you look at their top line. You have Jake Guentzel, Jeff Carter, and Brian Rust. Now, thank goodness they got Jeff Carter last year at the deadline. Wouldn't have thought that it would be this big of an addition, but Jeff Carter is a lot better of a replacement there than, say, a Danton Heinen or a Teddy Bluger. And again, no discredit to those guys, but Jeff Carter, again, he's an older player in his own right. And it's kind of interesting that he's now in Pittsburgh because he was with the Flyers for a while before he went out to LA. So Jeff Carter may be the man holding down that top line. I think a lot of people would say, wouldn't Malkin just step in? I think Malkin, he could play that first line. I think there's a lot of debate there, but if you want to keep chemistry together, you probably want Malkin playing with the same guys consistently. So maybe because you have Jeff Carter, if you're comfortable enough with that, leaving him as your first line center, maybe they don't get the minutes that they would with Sidney Crosby, but they'll maybe balance things out throughout the lineup a little more. But I don't think there's anything wrong with Carter, Rust, and Guentzel as that top line. Again, let me know your thoughts on that down below. I think there could be some debate there. Second line, you got Jason Zucker and Kasperi Kapanen on the wings with Evgeny Malkin. Now, I have my concerns about this second line, and again, it's not Malkin. It's not Evgeny Malkin. Again, he's getting older. He may not be the player he was, but Jason Zucker and Kasperi Kapanen, are they top six wingers? I think, again, with what happened last season, there is some debate to that. I think that's a big reason Toronto let go of Kapanen, because I don't necessarily know that they saw him as a top six center. With that said, though, I think playing with Malkin helps. But again, as Malkin gets older, how much more does he have in the tank? How motivated is Malkin at this point? Again, he's won 3 Stanley Cups. How much is there left in him? Again, and we're going to find that out this year, especially without Sidney Crosby. Now, looking at the third line, you got Brock McGinn, Danton Heinen, and the new guy, Brian Boyle. Brian Boyle, back on the East Coast. Actually, he's been there for the most part. He was with the Rangers. He was with Tampa, with Jersey. Now he's in Pittsburgh. So I think this is a nice spot for him there. But again, the fact Brian Boyle makes my third line here does give me some concern. Again, I think there's some debate there for who could also step into that line because there is some depth there. But I like Danton Heinen as a third line guy. That's a nice addition. He's coming back to the East Coast from Anaheim. And Brock McGinn moving up the coast. He was with Carolina last season, and the Hurricanes didn't want to pay him the money. I think he's a guy that, again, I'm not saying that I don't like Zucker and Kapanen, but I wouldn't be surprised if McGinn got in that top six at some point this year. And I think he could maybe, nip at the heels of some of those guys jumping in the top six. The fourth line, you have Zach Aston Reese, Teddy Bluger, and this one is kind of a wild card pick. I'm not necessarily confident in this one, but I'm going with it anyway. It's Phillip Hallender, the guy they picked up in the Jared McCann trade. And I like Phillip Hallender. I think he's a guy that maybe as a younger guy could come in and just kind of take over in training camp and maybe steal a spot in the lineup from maybe some of these other guys that have already been there. And looking at some of those depth guys, you have guys like Evan Rodriguez, Sam Lafferty, Samuel Poulin, and Anthony Angelo. Now, I think Radim Zorna could be another guy that this is something that definitely could come in the conversation. Samuel Poulin he was supposed to be the black ace in the 2020 bubble, the playoff bubble for the Penguins. That didn't really turn out. And now there's just other guys coming into the roster. I don't know where they're at with Poulin. Now, this is a guy that is out of the lineup right now for me and is playing in Wilkes-Barre. But he's a guy that could very well come mid-season, if there's an injury or two, he could find himself in the top six. That's just kind of how this works. And if guys like Zucker and Kapanen struggle in the beginning of the year, it makes it even that much more of an open spot for him maybe to jump in. So we could see a very weird shift here with Poulin this season. Can he establish himself in the NHL? Can he establish himself maybe in the top 6 alongside Malkin or Crosby? Or is he going to be a guy that ends up being just a guy that gets brought up and down, from the NHL to the AHL? And that's kind of the situation. Again, the Penguins have some depth on the up front, and it just, when you have this many guys, there is some questions there. And again, with Ron Hextall and Brian Burke there, you're gonna see them want to try different things out. See if they're, just fidget with things and kind of try out different players in different spots. I think Mike Sullivan is not going to be afraid to do that either. So looking at the defense, the defense isn't great. I have to be honest. Looking at it on paper, and this is without injuries. Again, that's another thing you have to remember too. You got Brian Dumoulin and Chris Letang as your top pair. 2 guys that have been injury prone, really, for the last 2 or 3 years. So there is some genuine concern even with your top pair. I like them as players. Again, on paper, it looks good. But again, come injuries and the fact that we haven't really seen much of them the last couple years, it does have some concern there from my end. And the fact they really didn't add anything on defense this offseason just makes that even more concerning. Now, looking at your second pair, I like John Marino and I like Marcus Pettersson. I think this is my favorite pair of the 3. Marcus Pettersson, a guy from Anaheim. I really wish they didn't trade him, but a really good player there. And John Marino had a great season last year. I'm expecting him to continue to develop. These 2 guys, this may be the top pair of the Penguins going into the opening night roster for next year in 2022. So I think there's a lot of potential there. I think they like Pettersson and Marino. I think that's going to be this is the changing of the guard. As guys like Dumoulin and Letang kind of find their way out, and specifically Letang. But again, Dumoulin's a good defenseman, but he's been injured. He's been injured and inconsistently in the lineup. And I hate to say it, what's one of the most valuable things is a guy that is reliable, that can actually be in the lineup. It's great if you have guys like Crosby, but if they're not in the lineup, it doesn't really help you that much, right? So with that, we're going to the third pair, and this one is a little bit terrifying because you got Michael Mathison, who they got from Florida in that Hornquist trade. I don't like that at all. I think that was just that was pretty much the move that took Jim Rutherford out of the NHL as a general manager. I think that was just a head scratcher. And then they also have Max Friedman, who I think even this offseason there was some press conferences and reporters were asking Ron Hextall, do you see Max Friedman as a third pairing defenseman? And I think that's somewhere where we could see the Penguins still make a move before the beginning of the season. I wouldn't be that surprised. But Max Friedman, I don't necessarily see him as a third-pairing defenseman. I don't think Ron Hextall does either. He said, we like our defense right now, but if there's an opportunity to improve that blue line, we absolutely will. So I wouldn't be surprised if we did see that. Now, looking at some of the depth defensemen, I think Mathison and Friedman could both find their way out of that third pair very easily because there's some guys that are not that far off from them. Guys like Chad Roweedle, Pierre-Olivier Joseph, the guy they picked up in that trade with the Coyotes with Phil Kessel. You also have Juuso Riikola, a guy that has kind of been in and out. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets another crack at it this year. So that is your depth for the Penguins. And then the other big question, besides Crosby going into the season this year, is the goaltending in between the pipes. And it's going to be the same thing as we saw last year. And according to Brian Burke, what he said last week in a report situation, he was doing an interview out in Vancouver. They were talking about his time in Vancouver, but they were talking about the goaltending. And, there has been a lot of, not necessarily hate, but angst, knowing that they're going to go with Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith again this year. And Brian Burke said, listen, every goaltender, as a young goaltender, has to go through that, that playoff run where they maybe don't do well. And there's no better way to get experience than playing in the playoffs. You're not really going to get that experience on the bench. You have to get it through playing it. And I think that Brian Burke is really sold out on Tristan Jarry, really likes what he's seen from him in terms of his mechanics and the fundamentals of him. and obviously him as a person, which can only go so far, right? But I think that is definitely going to be in the equation for the Penguins. And they're selling out on Tristan Jarry. So I guess we're going to see another year of Jarry and DeSmith. And we'll kind of see what happens. Again, the whole John Gibson situation, I don't think that's out of the water yet. If John Gibson were to get traded today, I think the team would be the Pittsburgh Penguins. That would absolutely be there. And again, because he's a Pittsburgh native and you could argue Pittsburgh has a need for another goaltender. You could definitely make the argument that could be the move that gets done. So, with that said, the Penguins right now, I said last year they were going to miss the playoffs, and obviously I was wrong. And a lot of you said, oh, you shouldn't count out Malkin and Crosby. Well, Crosby's not starting the season on time. He's going to miss all of training camp and the beginning of the regular season. And Malkin, in the final year of his contract, he's probably thinking about, is he moving to Florida next year? Is he going back to Russia? Again, I'm just speculating on that. But, it's one of those things where, does the core of this team even have the motivation? Because they did win back-to-back cups. Mike Sullivan was a part of that as well. This team has changed a decent amount since that 2016-2017 run that they had in back-to-back cups. Do they still have that touch that they had back then? I really don't think so. And I think there's just a lot of questions with some of their wingers, some of their defensemen. I just don't know if they're a deep enough team. And they really didn't make any moves this summer to get better. I mean, I think if they were supposedly in on a guy like Christian Dvorak, now he is in Montreal. I mean, really, if you looked at a guy like Tomas Hertl, maybe you could do that. But I know Burke and Hextall, they're kind of in a hard place because they want to still compete and win a Stanley Cup today. That's a big reason why Mario Lemieux brought them in. But the problem is they don't want to give up draft picks or prospects. So how do you make this team better when you don't have cap space, so you can't go out willy-nilly signing guys in free agency, and you also can't get better through trading draft picks? So they're kind of at a crossroads here, and I think we're going to get a lot of those questions answered this season. Guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. The big question for me is who's going to be the first-line center for the Penguins to start this season? Because it's likely, at this point, it's not going to be Sidney Crosby. From what we heard last week, it is going to be at minimum 6 weeks of recovery for Crosby, which means he may be back in 6 weeks and a day. He may be back in 7 weeks. He may not be back till 12 weeks, 13 weeks. That kind of scenario definitely raises eyebrows then. When they say a minimum of 6 weeks, it could be a year. Again, I'm not saying it's going to take that long, but you just don't necessarily know. And is Jeff Carter going to be there? Is it Evgeny Malkin? Let me know your thoughts down below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time.